The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the first batch of tariff letters will be sent out to countries from 1 a.m. Tuesday, Korea time. With just about 2 days left until the July 9th deadline, South Korea's top security advisor is in the U.S. for trade and security talks. South Korea's food ministry and food and retail industries have agreed to launch large-scale discount events to ease the burden of rising food prices. Prices of go-to food products like ramen, bread, and coffee will be cut as much as half of their original prices. The season's first heat wave warning was issued for all parts of the capital, Seoul, at 10 a.m. on Monday, 2 weeks earlier than July 25th of last year, when the country went through its worst heat wave ever. Letters with new tariff rates that U.S. President Donald Trump has warned of will be going out in just a matter of hours from now. South Korea's trade and security officials are in the U.S. for a full-court press ahead of the Trump administration's tariff deadline. Our Moon Ji-young starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced via Truth Social that the U.S. will start delivering tariff letters to other countries starting 12 noon Eastern Time on Monday. Currently, it is unknown which nations will be receiving the letter or have made deals. Earlier that day, Trump told reporters,
"Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. Could be 12, maybe 15. And they'll be going out on Monday, and some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made."
Trump added that either a letter will be sent or a deal will be done by July 9th. Following Trump's comments, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick indicated a 3-week reprieve.
Tariffs go into effect August 1st, but the president is setting the rates and the deals right now.
Great.
This comes after Trump's announcement of the tariff in April, which included a 10% base rate for most countries and additional rates, which in some cases went up to around 50%, although he later delayed the effective date for all but the 10% tariff until July 9th. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak is in Washington, D.C. for 3 days to discuss pending issues. On his way to the U.S. on Sunday, he told reporters that Seoul and Washington have been discussing issues related to trade and security.
As the current negotiation phase is becoming quite critical, I'm stepping up my involvement, which is why I'm visiting the United States.
He is expected to meet with his U.S. counterpart, Marco Rubio. When asked about defense cost sharing, he indicated that a range of issues were open for discussion, implying that cost sharing could be on the agenda. The agenda is also expected to include coordination for a summit between President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
The OECD projects South Korea's potential growth rate for 2025 at 1.9%, marking the first time the projection has fallen below 2%, a 0.1 percentage point drop from the 2% forecast last December. A potential economic growth rate of under 2% means that even if the factors of production, such as labor and capital, are operating as efficiently as possible, returning to the 2% level is not possible without inflation risks. The Lee Jae-myung administration has pledged to bring the country up to 3% potential growth rate. Lee's policies focus on addressing structural issues, such as low birth rates, an aging society, and weak innovation, and the hope of boosting long-term growth. In collaboration with South Korea's Agriculture Ministry and food companies, prices on essential foods such as ramen, bread, and coffee are being discounted up to 50% to help curb inflation and to support consumers during the summer vacation season. Our Park Jun-han has the details.
The government and food industry announced that they will provide up to a 50% discount on staple food items to alleviate the burden of rising prices during the summer vacation season. The announcement was reported 5 days after the release of June's inflation data, which indicated a year-on-year increase of 4.6% for processed foods, the highest in 19 months since November 2023. In June, 62 out of 73 processed food items saw price hikes. To tackle the inflationary impact of this, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs held discussions with major food and retail companies last Friday to outline plans to stabilize food prices. The discounted items will include products with high consumer price sensitivity, such as ramen and bread, and products with slightly reduced raw material costs, such as ice cream and juice, which are often consumed during the summer. Participating companies include Dongsim, Otugi, SBC Group, and CJ Cheiljedang. The Agriculture Ministry noted that rising costs of key ingredients, labor, and energy have increased the financial burden on food companies. To ease high cost pressure, the ministry has already applied tariff quotas to 21 imported raw materials and extended value-added tax exemptions for cocoa and coffee imports through 2025, as since 2023, the two have seen price increases of over 190% and 68% respectively. The ministry pledged to expand funding support for raw material purchases to ease the industry burden and agreed to continue discussions on issues such as overseas expansion and food ingredient supply. It will monitor processed food prices over the next month and will continue to discuss discounts with industry representatives. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung and newly appointed Prime Minister Kim Min-seok held their first lunch meeting on Monday. According to Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho, they discussed the Prime Minister's main responsibilities, including following up on the administration's policy agenda, identifying new and long-term policy issues, and resolving social conflicts, all with a focus on public safety, order, and livelihoods. On pending issues, Prime Minister Kim said he plans to meet with medical students and trainee doctors about a return to work. President Lee asked him to take an active role in resolving the matter. Now, the President and the Prime Minister will hold this closed-door meeting every Monday. Tensions are running high at the National Assembly as lawmakers reconvene for a new round of legislative activity, but also hinting at possible cooperation. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
The July extraordinary session of the National Assembly kicked off on Monday, with the ruling and opposition parties entering the term sharply divided following last week's passage of the highly contentious extra budget bill. The ruling Democratic Party is pushing to pass a number of bills that were previously vetoed by the former administration, including broadcasting reform legislation and a revision to the Trade Union and Labor Relations Adjustment Act, known as the Yellow Envelope Bill. The broadcasting bills aim to reduce political influence over public broadcasters by limiting the number of board members appointed by political parties, while the Yellow Envelope Bill seeks to broaden the definition of employer and restrict damage claims against labor unions. Efforts to reform the prosecution are also picking up pace.
We promise to swiftly implement the complete separation of investigation and indictment, ensure effective checks on prosecutorial power, and institutionalize political neutrality.
Meanwhile, the opposition People Power Party is continuing its efforts to counter the DP's legislative dominance. PPP floor leaders Hong Won-seok declared that the party would use upcoming confirmation hearings for ministerial nominees as an opportunity to push back against what the party sees as unilateral rule.
The People Power Party, together with the people, will examine the qualifications and moral integrity of ministerial nominees riddled with criminal suspicions on a microscopic level in order to block the arrogant and one-sided governance of the Lee Jae-myung administration.
Although ministerial nominees do not require a parliamentary vote for appointment, confirmation hearings serve as a key opportunity for the opposition party to vet and challenge the president's personnel decisions. Despite this heightened tension, both parties are making cautious moves towards cooperation. On the first day of the session, the policy chiefs of both parties formed a joint consultative body aimed at fast-tracking livelihood-related bills and coordinating shared campaign pledges made during the recent presidential election. Both sides acknowledged their differences on key policy matters but agreed on the need for discussion, not confrontation. As the session continues, the coming weeks will test whether bipartisan dialogue can truly take root. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung today met with Cardinal Lazara Yuhung-sik, the Vatican's Minister of Clergy, at his office in Yongsan, where they discussed cooperation between South Korea and the Vatican for peace on the Korean Peninsula.
대한민국의 평화와 또 한반도의 안정 이런 문제에 대해서 어쨌든 전 세계가 각별한 관심을 많이 갖고 계신데 남북 관계 개선에 우리 교황청이 좀 각별한 기여를 역할을 해주시면 좋겠다는 말씀드립니다.
Now, Pope Leo XIV is scheduled to visit Seoul in 2027 to attend World Youth Day. President Lee added that he hoped the Pope could stop by North Korea in time with his trip to Seoul. And the Cardinal responded he wished to see President Lee taking a photo with Chairman Kim Jong-un given that opportunity. Cardinal Yu also delivered the Pope's invitation for the South Korean leader to visit Rome, while President Lee thanked the Church for its role in restoring South Korea's democracy. The Cardinal is the first religious leader President Lee Jae-myung has met since his inauguration. It's been way too hot for July, and it only got worse. Seoul saw the whole city under a heat wave warning for the first time this year, while the southern part of the country suffered even more. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
Reaching up to 33.2 degrees Celsius on Monday, Seoul saw its hottest day of the year so far and issued a heat wave warning to every part of the capital for the first time this year.
Today is really hot. I feel like it wasn't this hot in the past.
A heat wave warning is issued when the highest feels-like temperature is expected to reach 35 degrees Celsius or higher for 2 or more consecutive days, or when major damage is anticipated as a result of the heat. In fact, Seoul is expected to see its highest temperature go up to 36 degrees on Tuesday. The first citywide heat wave warning of the year came a full 18 days earlier than last year. City officials are urging residents to stay indoors and keep cool. But of course, fountains like this offer a playful and much needed way to beat the heat.
They don't have these in California. Water helps me forget the heat because it cools me down and then I forget the heat.
Monday also marked Sosa, or lesser heat, a traditional seasonal marker falling usually on July 7th or 8th, signaling the start of the summer heat. While temperatures are rising, the hottest days are still ahead, expected to peak around what's called Taeseo, or great heat, later this month. Meanwhile, other parts of the country also saw extreme heat, particularly in the south. Gyeongsangnam-do Province's city of Arirang saw its temperature rise to 39.2 degrees. Starting on the 8th, changes in atmospheric pressure will lead to easterly winds across the country. This means areas west of the Baekdu-daegan-san mountain range, including Seoul and the greater capital region, are expected to see particularly scorching conditions. And with the heat also came casualties, with officials announcing that 2 people died due to heat on Sunday, taking the death toll to 7 since mid-May, when heat-related injuries started being recorded. 김도현, Arirang News.
Deadly floods in Texas have left dozens dead, including children attending a summer camp. And efforts are still ongoing to clear debris and find survivors. Our Pyeongyang has more.
Catastrophic floods rushed through central Texas on Friday and have left at least 82 dead. The death toll climbed over the Independence Day weekend as emergency crews carried out search and rescue efforts. Kerrville County was hit the hardest, with 40 adults and 28 children confirmed dead. Among those affected are children from Camp Mystics, an all-girls summer camp where 10 children still remain missing.
And it was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through. And we will remain 100% dedicated, searching for every single one of the children who were at Camp Mystic, as well as anybody else in the entire riverbed.
Efforts continue to recover bodies and find additional survivors. Volunteers have joined the mission and formed search parties, hoping to bring at least one more child home.
You know, I've got 2 babies at home. It's the least I could do. You know, they're home safe, and there's people out there that they're missing their children or their family members, so I feel like it's the least I could do to help.
Dozens remain missing. Texas Governor Greg Abbott warned that more rounds of heavy rain are expected to last through Tuesday, potentially triggering further life-threatening floods in already saturated areas. The U.S. National Weather Service has extended a flood watch across much of south central Texas, forecasting several more inches of rainfall in the coming days. On Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that he had approved a major disaster declaration, granting first responders access to essential resources for ongoing search and recovery operations. He acknowledged the devastating toll on families, calling it an unimaginable tragedy with numerous lives lost, and pledged that his administration would closely coordinate with state and local officials. Pyeongyang, Arirang News.
The resumed ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas ended in deadlock, with the 2 sides failing to reach common ground. And violence on the ground continues to intensify despite the growing diplomatic push. Our 신새벽 reports.
The first round of ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, which opened on Saturday in Doha, has ended without a breakthrough. According to reports from Reuters and AFP, the delegations from both sides engaged in indirect negotiations facilitated by mediators. A Palestinian official told AFP the talks focused on a ceasefire framework and a possible hostage prisoner exchange. But no progress was made in the first meeting. Reuters also cited several Palestinian sources who said the initial round concluded early Sunday morning. They claimed the Israeli delegation lacked the authority to reach a deal. Meanwhile, ahead of his scheduled meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Monday, President Trump expressed optimism about a possible breakthrough between Israel and Hamas.
I think there's a good chance we have a deal with Hamas during the coming week.
Netanyahu also voiced confidence that his talks with a U.S. leader would significantly contribute to progress in the negotiations.
I believe that the conversation with President Trump can definitely help advance this outcome.
Ahead of the negotiations, Hamas had reportedly proposed a revised truce plan. It includes a 60-day ceasefire and the return of more than 10 living Israeli hostages and the bodies of several others in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Hamas also demanded Israeli troops pull back to pre-March positions when earlier talks collapsed. Other conditions include restarting UN-led humanitarian operations in Gaza and reopening the Rafah border with Egypt for medical evacuations. However, Israel rejected the proposal, calling it unacceptable. Despite diplomatic efforts, violence continued on the ground on Sunday. An Israeli airstrike targeting a residential area in northern Gaza before dawn killed 10 people. In total, Gaza's civil defense said 26 Palestinians were killed in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip on Sunday alone. 신세벽, Arirang News.
The soundtrack for Netflix's animated film K-pop Demon Hunters has jumped 5 spots at number 3 on the Billboard 200 chart. Billboard reported last Sunday that the album has become the top charting soundtrack of the year so far. It also marked the highest charting animated film soundtrack since Encanto, which spent 9 weeks at number 1 in 2022. And just last Friday, the track Your Idol topped Spotify's U.S. daily charts, adding even more momentum. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Nate. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
So why don't we start with EAFF E-1 Champions that just got underway this evening. In fact, South Korea's men's match against China kicked off, minutes ago.
Yes, that's right. And they are off to the perfect start. It's currently 1-0.
Wow.
Lee Dong-kyung scored after 9 minutes. A great goal from outside of the box. But yes, at Yongin Mira Stadium, South Korea are getting their EAFF campaign up and running as they look to regain the title they lost to Japan in 2022. Now, some team news from earlier today as John Jin-woo, the K-League 1 top scorer, was forced to withdraw from the squad due to illness. He was complaining of feeling dizzy, and FC Seoul's Jong Seung-won was brought in as a replacement. South Korea are the most successful team in the competition with 5 titles overall and won it 3 times in a row from 2015 to 2019. But they lost 3-0 to Japan in the final group game in 2022 to surrender their crown, and so will be looking to make amends this time around. Up next is Hong Kong on July 11th and then Japan on the 15th.
Moving on to baseball now. In the KBO, I believe the Hana Eagles are having their best season in decades. I believe 3 decades?
Yes, they are top of the standings at the halfway point of the season for the first time in 33 years.
Wow.
Now, this was confirmed thanks to a 10-1 win over the Kium Heroes on Sunday to make it 49 wins. The Eagles are now looking for 50 wins at this stage for the first time since 1992, when they last won the regular season. Now, 71.4% of teams that earned 50 wins at the halfway point go on to win the regular season. Now, such a good showing has been helped by the team's pitching players, with Cody Ponce and Ryan Weiss each earning 10 wins. The Eagles will face the informed Kia Tigers in the last series before the summer break, during which on July 12th in Daejeon there'll be the All-Star game. But LG Twins first baseman Austin Dean and Kia Tigers pitcher Adam Oller will both miss out through injury.
Paul, now to MLB, I have to say mixed fortunes for 2 South Korean stars.
Yes, that's right. Kim Hye-sung was back in the starting lineup for the LA Dodgers. And by all accounts, he had a very impressive display, both at the plate and in the field. He started as hitter number 6 and second baseman against the Houston Astros, going 1 for 4. His defensive plays in the first 2 innings earned him standing ovations, getting hold of a Christian Walker hit down the middle before firing it to first base to end the inning. A leaping throw resulted in a similar fate for Yena Diaz in the second, but despite this, the Dodgers lost the match 5-1. Meanwhile, Kim Ha-sung of the Tampa Bay Rays returned from injury, but is out again. Kim made his first appearance for the Rays and first in MLB in 11 months on Friday, going 1 for 3 with a stolen base against the Minnesota Twins, marking his return from a shoulder injury. However, he missed the next 2 games with cramp in his right calf. The Rays haven't commented on when he'll be back.
All right, Paul, thanks for that. I'll see you next Monday again.
Yes, thank you.
The first heat wave warning this year has been issued for Seoul today. It is 18 days earlier than last year. Heat wave warnings were also in place in western and southern parts of the country, and the rest of the country is under the heat wave advisories. With heat waves everywhere, the daytime temperature in Seoul will soar to 36 degrees Celsius tomorrow and Wednesday, and the feels-like temperature will exceed 35 degrees across the country. In addition, it will feel as hot as 29 degrees in Seoul metropolitan area tonight, which is almost considered a supertropical night. Tomorrow morning will start off at 27 degrees in Seoul, 24 degrees in Gyeongju. Daily highs will go up to 35 degrees in Chuncheon and Gwangju, 22 degrees in Jeju. The heat wave is expected to strengthen this week, mainly in the western regions. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고. 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. Major diplomatic developments are shaping this week's international landscape. South Korea's National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak and Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu are in Washington preparing for the crucial groundwork for the anticipated Korea-u.s. summit amid delicate tariff discussions. President Lee Jae-myung is set to dispatch envoys to an unprecedented number of countries, including the U.S., China, Japan, Australia, and India, signaling an expanded diplomatic strategy. Now, globally, President Trump continues navigating the Ukraine conflict, offering Patriot missile support to Zelensky while warning Putin of new sanctions. Trump's broader Middle East initiative also progresses, marked by his historic lifting of sanctions on Syria and ongoing ceasefire negotiations in Gaza. Meanwhile, China's Xi Jinping is absent from the BRICS summit in Brazil, fueling speculation about internal instability and his health. So today we unpack these crucial diplomatic shifts and explore their wider implications for global stability. For this, we are joined by Min Jung-hoon, professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, here in the studio with us. A big welcome, Professor.
Good evening.
And also joining us online is Daniel Connolly, Associate Professor of International Relations at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start with Professor Min. So like I've said, the Trump administration's tariff waiver is nearing its expiration, and Korea's National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak has arrived in Washington, reportedly, and he stressed the need for senior engagement to meet top officials in Washington over there. It's our first minister-level visit to Washington since President Lee has taken office. Would you expect some progress in terms of tariff talks or summit coordination?
Yeah, basically, I expect that the high-ranking officials' visit to Washington this time would provide the favorable the environment for the ongoing negotiations between South Korea and U.S. And as you mentioned, the South Korea's National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak is visiting Washington for talks with his U.S. counterparts like State Secretary Marco Rubio on various issues that will include the trade negotiations and potential summit meeting between President Lee Jae-myung and President Donald Trump. And specifically, Ri Sung-nak said that the South Korea and U.S. Have been closely discussing trade and security issues, and his visit is intended to deepen those consultations. And he also said that the negotiations are going through a critical phase, and it is necessary for high-level officials like him to get more involved in the negotiations. So he has come to visit Washington to talk with his U.S. counterparts and try to show South Korea's strong intention to actively negotiate with the U.S. And in a parallel, the diplomatic effort, Trade Minister Yo Han-gu is also visiting Washington to lead the trade negotiations. And Ri Sung-nak said that their visit to Washington is part of the government's all-out effort to address the situation. And meanwhile, regarding a potential presidential summit meeting between the two countries, Ri Sung-nak confirmed that it was on the agenda of his upcoming discussions with his counterparts, like the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So overall, their visit to Washington this time shows that Lee government is working hard to cope with the important issues in its relations with the U.S., like the trade negotiations and holding a summit meeting between the two countries in each early days in office. As you know, the ROK-U.S. relations account for about half of the South Korea, the diplomatic relations overall.
So this latest visit must carry a lot of weight. We'll have to wait for more results coming in. But speaking of the Korea-U.S. summit, there are two views. So hold the summit as soon as possible or wait until sensitive issues are kind of resolved. Professor Connolly, which approach do you think would be more beneficial for South Korea? All right, Professor Connolly, I think we are experiencing some technical difficulties right now. So we will get right back to you just after this next question. We will speak to Professor Min first. So President Lee Jae-myung is reportedly preparing to send special envoys to more countries, you know, like I've said in the beginning, to U.S., China, Japan, Australia, and more. How do you think this approach of, you know, sending a lot of envoys to countries compare with past governments? And what is the main goal behind this outreach?
Yes, as you mentioned, it is known that Lee government plans to send special envoys to major countries this month. And the presidential office said that it is reviewing a plan that send envoys to 10 countries, including U.S., Japan, China, European Union, Australia, Canada, France, and India. And it is part of broader diplomatic outreach efforts. And such a diplomatic move can be seen as an effort to strengthen the foundation for summit diplomacy by sending special envoys who can brief on President Lee's state of affairs policy and deliver friendly messages to widen exchange. And the presidential office also said that the government is trying to appoint special envoys who can appropriately explain its governing philosophy and the foreign policy agendas. And compared with the previous government, Lee government is planning to send special envoys to more countries, including Canada and India and France. For example, former President Yoon Suk-yeol sent a policy consultation delegation to only 2 countries, U.S. and Japan, and the former President Moon Jae-in sent special envoys to U.S., China, Japan, Russia, and EU early in his presidency. So sending special envoys to 10 countries shows that Lee government is trying to expand the scope of its diplomacy based on its national interests and establish the foundation to be a global core state or global leading state in the international community.
It definitely signals the Lee administration's ambitious diplomatic strategy. Now let's connect back to Professor Connolly. Are you there, Professor?
Yes, I hope you can hear me now.
I can hear you very perfectly right now. So let's go back to our previous question about the Korea-U.S. summit. Like I've said, there are 2 views: holding the summit as soon as possible or waiting until sensitive issues have been recovered. Which do you think would be more advantageous for Korea?
Normally, in a period of normal diplomacy, the summit comes at the end of all the groundwork and the expert meetings before the leaders even get a chance to meet. But the Trump era doesn't really follow normal diplomatic rules. And I do think a leader summit in the Trump era is sometimes very effective to break a logjam. If there's some obstacles in the way, Trump can sometimes erase them in an instant. But I think this is a problematic strategy for South Korea because most leaders who succeed in this kind of one-on-one with Trump tend to either be strongman types or extremely submissive and even shameless leaders who very kind of bow the knee to him quite openly. And I think it's safe to say that President Lee doesn't fit either of these categories. So having a one-on-one summit with President Trump before a lot of the sensitive details are solved, I think could be very problematic for South Korea. And we don't want to see President Lee kind of embarrassed in this kind of one-on-one summit because the U.S. alliance is so important to South Korea.
So more of a wait-and-see approach would be a little bit advantageous for Korea, considering the situation right now. Now, let's turn to global affairs, Professor Connolly. President Trump continues to navigate the Ukraine conflict and offered Patriot missile support to Zelensky while warning Putin of new sanctions as well. After Trump's recent call with Putin yielded no progress, Russia actually launched a major summer offensive. Professor, what's Putin's current strategy there?
Yeah, I definitely think that Putin believes time is on his side. The Israeli war with Iran has really depleted air defense missiles in Israel and to some extent in the United States. I think even if Trump wants to give more Patriots to Ukraine, there's only so many being produced a year. And this is kind of an opportunity for Russia to use its drone and missile strikes to degrade a lot of the Ukrainian logistics and supply lines ahead of the summer offensive. And I don't think Putin expects a breakthrough this summer. This is an attritional war. Even though some Ukrainian successes like Operation Spiderweb really embarrassed the Russians, it hasn't fundamentally changed the balance of power. And I think the Russian economy is doing much stronger than many experts expected, especially earlier in the war. And just last week, there were reports that the Chinese foreign minister told European Union officials that China does not want Russia to fail in Ukraine. And I think all of this is contributing to a sense in Putin's kind of inner circle that Russia can do another year, another 2 years, or even longer while the West remains disunited and American supplies dwindle, even if there are some token shipments of Patriots in the near future.
Now, what about ties with Russia then, Professor Min? Well, President Trump has hinted at additional sanctions against Russia. He also suggested, resuming support for Patriot missile systems. Do you think this could lead to any significant changes in U.S.-Russia relations or the war in Ukraine in general?
Well, there may be a possibility that U.S. could lean toward Ukraine over Russia, considering that President Trump is very disappointed in President Putin in terms of not following what Trump wants to end the Ukraine war. But I think it is still much more plausible to say that U.S. want to mainly negotiate with Russia to end the war as quickly as possible, and it want to secure its economic interests by enhancing its cooperation with Russia, not Ukraine. So currently, Russia is trying to secure as much the Ukraine territory as possible to gain an advantageous position in ceasefire negotiations in the near future. And to this end, it is ignoring President Trump's request to cease fire and continuing its military operations. And it is reported that Russia is gradually taking over more Ukraine territory. And meanwhile, Ukraine, which has difficulty in receiving enough military support from U.S. now, is showing limitations in fighting back against Russian attacks. So now it is losing more of its territory. And President Trump expressed his dissatisfaction with President Putin, who is continuing the war. And he also showed the willingness to resume support for Patriot missile systems to Ukraine. However, I think it's still too early to say that this situation is a clear signal that U.S. is shifting and leaning toward Ukraine over Russia. Of course, how much longer President Putin continues to war while ignoring President Trump's request to end the war with a ceasefire could mainly affect U.S. position with Russia and Ukraine, but it seems unlikely that U.S. will drastically change its position that prioritizes ending the war quickly through negotiations with Russia. So it seems more appropriate to see the current situation as President Trump just expressing his dissatisfaction with Russia for now.
Too early to judge right now first. Now, let's turn to President Trump's broader Middle East initiative. He has been, there are speculation actually about a possible meeting between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu today in the coming hours. So given the ongoing Gaza ceasefire talks, do you think today's discussions could lead to some meaningful progress, Professor Connolly?
I think it's going to be a really interesting meeting. Both leaders are going to congratulate themselves on their surprise attacks on the Iranian nuclear program. I think there's going to be quite a bit of maybe disputes about who's the one most responsible for this victory. But when it comes to finding a permanent end to the Gaza war, there is a very important difference in terms of the Israeli and the U.S. position. Netanyahu, he kind of needs the state of exception that's represented by the war in Gaza for his personal political survival. Domestically, he's facing corruption and bribery investigations, and his own right-wing coalition partners, they want the war to continue in Gaza. They have very extremist kind of agendas, maybe even ethnic cleansing in Gaza. So for him to end the war, it might cause a political crisis for him. On the other hand, Trump very much wants to make a deal. This is part of his kind of agenda to make peace in the Middle East, more broadly to integrate Israel in the region. So Israeli leaders cannot ignore Trump's demands for peace. So even during the negotiations for a truce in the war in Iran, there are reports that Trump's outburst of anger towards the Israelis really shocked them. And I think this exemplifies how the U.S. have a lot of leverage over Israel. The question is President Trump ready to use this leverage? And my expectation is perhaps a temporary ceasefire, return of hostages at best, but probably not a lasting peace deal. And this will be something that can give Trump a temporary victory to post on social media. And for the Israelis, this will give a pause in the war and continue the state of exception for the Israeli prime minister.
So a little bit complex situation for lasting peace. Now let's turn to the BRICS summit led by China and Russia. It took place in Brazil from July 6th to the 7th, but apparently President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin were notably absent. Professor Min, and there are currently speculations about President Xi Jinping's health or political instability due to his absence there, but China has been rejecting that. But there are still some speculations. Why do you think these speculations around the Chinese leadership continue to arise?
Well, it's not still certain what's happening in Beijing. Like as you mentioned, the President Xi has a health problem or he's losing power. Not sure anything. But personally, I think that neither is the case for President Xi Jinping this time. As you know, after securing a third term in 2023, and appointing his close associate to key positions in the Chinese government, President Xi's power became absolute and very strong. And the forces within the Chinese Communist Party that could track President Xi's power disappeared. And as a result, principles and discipline became loose, and corruption and other problems began to appear in the Chinese government. And as such problems became more frequent, President Xi felt the need to establish discipline more firmly, and therefore he focused on resolving domestic problems and probably decided not to attend the BRICS summit this time. And it is known that such problems have been almost resolved, and President Xi has come back to the media and the public and showed that his leadership is strong and solid. So it shows that there has been no major problem with President Xi's power, and therefore his leadership is expected to remain solid in the coming years.
All right, Professor, thank you for the analysis. So across, Washington, Beijing, and beyond, today, this week, a lot of diplomatic signals have been happening. It shows that it's really interconnected to each other. So we'll keep track of whether these moves would lead to more momentum moving forward. But as of now, we'll have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Min.
Thank you.
And Professor Connolly, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성.